Beyond the unbreakable Great Wall, 100,000 barbarians are waiting to break through. A small elite squad of Vens, however, manages to scale the wall from the rear for a surprise attack, but due to the heavy gates, ordinary men cannot open them, except for the giants. Some excited wildlings start climbing the wall.
Drop the side, boys! Hoist her up! Hoist her up!
The then squad that launched the rear assault is eventually defeated within the castle. Tormund, the last remaining member, begins to regret why he trusted Jon Snow. However, Jon Snow doesn't kill him. Instead, he orders him to be imprisoned for interrogation. Although he survives the night safely, Jon Snow knows that the king beyond the wall, Mance Raider, will still launch an attack on the wall at sunset. So, he plans to personally assassinate Mance because he knows that Mance's ability to unite 90 different wildling tribes is extremely strong. Jon Snow arrives at the tunnel beneath the wall and witnesses Gren's lifeless body crushed under a giant, feeling an indescribable sadness.
You're within 100 yards of him. They won't just kill you. They'll boil you, they'll flay you, they'll make it last days. It's a bad plan. What's your plan?
Because of his command to prioritize the greater good, his first true friend, someone he considered a brother, sacrificed his life to fulfill his promise to Jon. But the responsibility continues, and to avoid going without a return, he temporarily entrusts Samwell Tarly with the honor of the Mormont family's sword.
In case I don't come back. Come back.
With corpses littering the landscape outside the wall, Jon Snow, alone, ventures deep into the forest. As someone who once infiltrated the wildling tribes, he is surrounded by armed men who have their weapons pointed at him. Jon Snow claims that he was sent to negotiate and truthfully admits that he killed their leader to earn their trust. When Mance mentions the sacrifices of Ygritte and the giant King Mag, Jon Snow also mentions his fallen friend Gren. The two men, in the most gentlemanly manner, honor their fallen comrades, each fulfilling their own responsibilities.
Ygritte. Ygritte.
A good leader must be willing to sacrifice themselves. Jon Snow, carrying the vow to protect humanity, ventures alone into the wildling camp, which boasts a force of 100,000, preparing for another assault on the wall. After a moment of gentlemanly exchange, Jon Snow proposes, in order to minimize losses on both sides, that Mance leads his people back to the north. Otherwise, relying on the advantage of the wall will only result in mutual destruction. As Jon Snow weakly pleads his case, Mance reveals that he has sent another 500 men to scale the wall 10 miles away. Although casualties will occur, even if half of them make it through, it would be enough for another attack tonight. But Mance states that his intention is not to plunder. It is because winter is coming, and everyone is heading to the other side of the wall for survival, because there is something more terrifying than war in the north. If they open the gates and let them through, he promises that not another soul will die.
Refuse, and we'll kill every last man in Castle Black. That's why you're here. Killing a man in his own tent when he's just offered you peace. Is that what the Night's Watch is? Is that what you are?
You're attacking us! No. It's like you said, we don't have the men.
As the cavalry surrounded them from all sides, Mance's small squad was defenseless. In an era of cold weapons, cavalry was like tanks, and the wildlings were surrounded in less than 10 minutes. Stannis Baratheon is the younger brother of Robert Baratheon. After his brother Robert's death, he declared himself the rightful heir to the throne. However, he was defeated in the battle for the throne and returned to the north to seek a comeback. After Jon Snow revealed his identity, leveraging his father's reputation, he managed to convince Stannis to spare Mance's life temporarily. They needed to burn the bodies. So when Jon Snow returned, he asked Tormund if there were any farewell words. Even though Tormund's fate was uncertain, he still entrusted Jon Snow with a task.
She loved you.
She told you?
No. All she ever talked about was killing you. She belongs in the north. The real north.
Some people are just born in the wrong place, but that doesn't make them monsters. In the struggle for the Iron Throne, the king's direct younger brother began to use everything at his disposal. Stannis, who was expanding his influence in the north, hoped that Jon Snow would persuade the Wildlings to join him in conquering the Seven Kingdoms. He claimed that if Mance kneeled and pledged his allegiance, as the king in the north, he would pardon all the Wildlings and allow them to enter the Wall and grant them freedom. Mance appreciated Jon Snow, so he sent him to accomplish this task. However, Mance already suspected the conditions, and the free folk never kneel to anyone. He would not let his people shed more blood.
How will they do it? Beheading? Hanging?
They'll burn you alive.
Everyone has a strong side, but when faced with fear from within, they cannot leverage that strength. Despite his extreme fear of being burned alive, Mance refused to compromise, facing the execution and his own people. When Stannis asked for the last time, the king beyond the wall chose to stick to his beliefs. Seeing Mance's agonizing torment in the face of imminent execution, Jon Snow, unable to bear it, ended his suffering from a distance. Of course, this unauthorized execution displeased Stannis, and he sent Jon Snow to persuade another leader who only served the Stark family as the king in the north. It was the 10-year-old niece of the former Lord Commander who was killed by the mutineers, Lyanna Mormont. Moreover, they had to hold a new election for the Lord Commander that evening. If Jon Snow lost, his days at the Wall would undoubtedly be difficult. The new training officer would not spare Jon Snow's friends either. So, as long as Jon Snow pledged loyalty and helped Stannis conquer the North, Stannis would fulfill Jon Snow's lifelong pursuit, allowing him to leave without being mistreated.
Kneel before me, lay your sword at my feet, pledge me your service and you'll rise again as Jon Stark, Lord of Winterfell.
However, Jon Snow believed that he had already made his vows and committed to abandoning all claims to power and wealth, becoming a member of the Night's Watch at the Wall. Therefore, he decided to refuse this opportunity.
Anyone wish to speak? For candidates, before we cast our tokens, for the 998th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch.
After a desperate resistance from the 100 men of the Night's Watch, they finally captured the king beyond the wall, resolving the crisis. However, with the Lord Commander being killed by traitors, the immediate task was to elect a new Lord Commander. After the rules were explained by the respected Maester, everyone began recommending their preferred candidates. The second-in-command promptly recommended the new training officer.
He was acting commander when the wall came under attack and led us to victory against the Wildlings. He's a veteran of 100 battles and has been a defender of the Watch and the Wall almost all of his life.
Sir Dennis Mallister joined the Watch as a boy and has served loyally longer than any other ranger. Through 10 winters he served. As commander of the Shadow Tower, he kept the Wildlings away. We could do no better.
If there's no one else, we will begin the voting. Each
Mr.
brother
Raymond.
will-
Despite the advantage of age, Samwell Tarly started recommending Jon Snow himself, stating that while the second-in-command was hiding underground, Jon Snow was still on the battlefield, leading the charge. Though the new training officer was brave as well, it was Jon Snow who took up the heavy burden after being injured, even single-handedly ending the leadership of the Thens. Knowing that negotiating was a death sentence, Jon Snow still willingly met with the Wildling leader, Mance. However, the main objective was to lead everyone in avenging Commander Mormont. Voting began, and after careful consideration, the votes for the new training officer and Jon Snow were tied, but the Maester decisively supported Jon Snow without hesitation. The following day marked the first day of the new Lord Commander's term. Although the Maester was absent due to illness, Jon Snow quickly adapted to his elevated position. His first order of business was to send people to repair the latrines.
Brian. Seems like a good job for a ginger. You have more experience than any other ranger at Castle Black. You proved your valor many times over while defending the wall from the Wildling attack. I name you first ranger.
As Jon Snow knew that while the training officer had shortcomings, his loyalty to the wall was unmatched. The second-in-command, upon hearing that he would be sent to an empty castle, openly and disrespectfully refused the order.
That was a command, not an offer.
I will not go meekly off to freeze and die.
Have it!
Are you refusing to obey my order?
You can stick your order up your bastard arse.
Take Lord Janis outside. Ollie, bring me my sword.
When external forces affect one's interests, they often make decisions for self-preservation. Seeing that his former ally refused to help him, the second-in-command instantly regretted and pleaded for forgiveness. However, in order to intimidate those who did not vote for him, Jon Snow had to provide an explanation for the power he held.
My lord, please, mercy! Mercy! I'll go, I will! Please.
As news arrived from Essos, the Maester learned about the existence of another member of the Targaryen bloodline, Daenerys Targaryen. Due to the Maester's old age and frail health, he was unable to attend every council meeting, so Jon Snow visited him, hoping to receive some advice regarding his upcoming decisions.
Half the men will hate me the moment I give the order.
Half the men hate you already, Lord Commander. Do it.
But you don't know what it is.
That doesn't matter. You do. Little joy in your command. But, with luck, kill the boy, Jon Snow.
Because Jon Snow knew the threat of the undead, and Samwell Tarly had witnessed the formation of the army of the dead, they were aware of the danger they faced. So, Jon Snow wants to use his position as the Lord Commander to persuade Tormund to go north of the Wall and gather all the remaining wildlings to bring them back to the Wall. He promises to open the gates and allocate land to everyone for settlement.
The day I ask my people to fight with the crows is the day my people cut my guts from my belly and make me eat them.
And how many of your people can't fight? The women, the children, the old, the sick, what happens to them? You're condemning them to death. Maybe you're just a coward.
Watching Jon Snow unhesitatingly unlock his handcuffs and repeatedly emphasizing that it's not about personal gain but the need for all the wildlings to have a leader who can take them to a safe place before the snowstorm arrives, because they will be the first to suffer from the approaching White Walkers. Seeing Jon Snow's genuine concern for the free folk, Tormund reveals the location of their main camp. Due to the terrain, they need ships, and they hear Jon Snow readily agreeing to ask Stannis for ships. To ensure safety, Tormund asks Jon Snow, the Lord Commander, to accompany him.
You come with me, or I don't go.
The astonishing decision causes an uproar among everyone. Since birth, they have known the Wall as a defense against the wildlings, and they have never encountered the White Walkers. The idea of opening the Wall to welcome the wildlings is met with opposition, even from Jon Snow's closest brothers, who advise him to think twice. But Jon Snow still hopes that everyone will gather together to fight against the undead. If these free folk fall, it will only increase the strength of the White Walkers.
They put an arrow through my father's head right in front of me. They butchered my mother. Everyone I ever knew.
Each person may be clouded by resentment, but someone must foresee and bear the responsibility for the greater good. Under the disapproving gaze of everyone, Jon Snow, along with the dragon glass provided by Samwell Tarly and a few trusted brothers, embarks on this perilous journey. With Jon Snow's departure, Maester Aemon instructs Samwell Tarly to leave quickly with Gilly. Not long after, the last pure-blood Targaryen descendant dies of natural causes.
You're losing all your friends, Tarly.
At the stronghold of Hardhome, where the free folk reside, Tormund leads his people, who have been at war with the Night's Watch for centuries. They are ready to tear apart the Night's Watch. However, they are greeted by the Night King, who mocks Tormund before he can even speak. When Tormund suggests convening the leaders for a discussion, the Night King outright refuses.
You don't give the orders here.
I'm not giving an order.
Why aren't you in chains?
He's not my prisoner.
You fight for the crows now?
I don't fight for the crows.
Do you get down on your knees and suck his cock?
Gather the elders and let's talk.
As all the tribal leaders gather, Jon Snow reveals his identity as the Lord Commander and explains his purpose of joining forces against the White Walkers. Despite the skepticism of the others, Jon Snow presents the dragon glass and promises to distribute it to every fighting person. He also suggests that it would be safer for everyone to accompany him south, and Mance would have wanted the same outcome, but the only condition is that all the free folk must swear to fight alongside him when the battle against the White Walkers begins.
Where is Mance? He died.
Oh? I put an arrow through his heart.
None of you saw Mance die.
And the dead come with it. No clan can stop them.
The free folk can't stop them, the Night's Watch can't stop them, and all the Southern Kings can't stop them.
Only together. All of us. And even then it may not be enough, but at least we'll give the a fight.
You vouch for this man, Tormund.
No one believes the black-clothed man, who have been enemies for a millennium. However, Tormund is willing to vouch for Jon Snow. A few individuals also begin to speak in favor of survival, deciding to board ships and head south of the Wall. However, the then suspect that there might be a trap, fearing that they could be ambushed and thrown into the sea to their deaths while on the ships. As a result, only a small number of people begin to board the ships, but Jon Snow still can't bear to leave the rest behind.
They're running out of food, and there's nothing to hunt. They'll come around.
As they watch a sudden blizzard sweeping down from the mountains, all the dogs in the stronghold go mad. Sensing something is wrong, the Thens order the harbor gates to be closed.